So welcome to another episode of Girls Gone. Where are we going today, Rita?
We're going dreaming.
Oh, I like that. Yeah, let's go dreaming. That's awesome. Okay, so tell us about our podcast today.
Okay, so today's podcast is called the Dream Big Podcast, and it's a family-friendly podcast that is for kids and also adults, and it basically talks about how you can make your dreams a reality. But what makes it special is that it's hosted by 7-year-old Eva Cartman, who's a second grader right now, and she does this with her mom, Olga. And so they started this podcast, I think, about 2 years ago because they listened to a bunch of podcasts together and they didn't have a lot that seemed to be targeted towards kids. So they just decided to make one, which I think is kind of awesome. Have you ever kind of started some kind of crazy project with your kids?
All the time, yeah. We start crazy projects. We get inspiration all the time. Never quite to this degree, which is amazing. Yeah, I went back and listened to her 5-year-old voice, and it was just charming. It's so, and then to hear her now, I mean, she's grown as an entertainer.
I know. I was so impressed with her. I was listening to her, and I was thinking, wow, I didn't hear her say once.
Exactly, and I hear myself say it in all of our podcasts. I try not to, but I do.
Okay, so in this episode, the one that I picked, which is a fairly recent one, she interviews General Stanley McChrystal, who is now retired, and he led the Joint Special Operations Command in Iraq during the Persian Gulf Wars, and he was also the top commander of American forces in Afghanistan. So definitely big leadership role.
I just dial that back and say kudos to both of them. I mean, here's this amazing general agreeing to be interviewed by a 7-year-old, and this little 7-year-old having the pull to attract, I'm sure, a 4-star general to her podcast. That's amazing. Can't wait to tweet at her.
I know. So had you ever heard of General McChrystal, or were you familiar at all with him?
I can remember hearing about him in the news, and when these conflicts were going on, and not really knowing much more about him than that. He always came across as a very professional leader. I did the again. He comes across as someone who's really competent. I don't think I ever heard much controversy about him either that you hear about so many of the other leaders of our armed forces, right? Have you?
No. He's actually usually I feel like people who make it to that level of leadership tend to be pretty level-headed and have a long history of kind of making, fairly good decisions. You don't get to be
not a lot of do-overs in the Army. No.
No, not really. If you mess up, it's usually not a good thing. But one of the reasons why I picked this particular episode is because I feel like I always hear a lot of misconceptions about leadership in the military. Yeah. And it seems like there's this general idea that military leaders tend to be very authoritative, very much top down, which there is a component of that in the military just because of the nature of the particular job. But the really great leaders are amazing. And as I've mentioned before, I used to be in the Marine Corps. I just did an enlistment. So I'm not like retired or anything. But in that short time frame, almost all of the leaders that I interacted with were amazing people, and people who I valued their insight. So I never felt like I was being, beaten down with orders, so to speak. So that was kind of one of the reasons why I wanted to get this perspective of a military leader.
And McChrystal came across as the most confident and calm and level-headed. Every word that came out of his mouth in this podcast just oozed every leadership principle that we have discussed all semester. I mean, it just flowed off his tongue. It was clearly second nature to him. He was inspiring.
Oh, definitely. So we always talk about quotes. So was there any particular quote that just jumped out at you from this episode?
Just one that Eva said. She was so charming in her interview, and I loved the way he reacted to what she said by interpreting it, as how he would interact with people. But she said about people like people who are interested in them, and that's what you have to do if you want to make a new friend at school. And I thought that is really profound and insightful and spot on with leadership. So little 7-year-old Eva is leading the way to making friends at school by just being interested in them.
I know. I can't wait to see who she grows up to be and what she ends up doing, because I'm pretty sure it's going to be amazing.
We're going to have to recommend those books to her from Dr. LaPrairie's list. It's a great time to be a girl. She might just grow up to be Madam President. You never know.
Are you crazy? We're going to be reading her book in a few years to learn lessons from her.
Exactly.
Okay, so in this podcast, one of the questions that General McChrystal answers is about being on a team and then basically motivating them to achieve greatness. Yeah. And I love this question because she asked about it in terms of you're in school and you have to work with a group of students, and you want to make sure everyone gets an A. So if you're like the team leader, what do you do? Yeah. Which I thought it was really relevant. And what I loved about this question was that even though it seems like a really minor, inconsequential thing for kids, the leadership that they have to display in those situations is the same type of skills that you have to have as an adult, even if you are a general in the military. Right. So McChrystal was, talking about how the leader's role is to work for the people, and kind of empowering and inspiring them. So kind of what inspired you about that comment?
Again, it was just his embodiment of servant leadership. And when we did our projects earlier in the year about our job perspectives, to me, that was a really important, and I guess for me, when I talk about empowering others in my organization, that is tied to servant leadership. But I was so disappointed to find in the job postings that serving others in this capacity wasn't mentioned. I don't believe even one time. So to hear him talk about that validated for me that's an important characteristic in leadership. And so I put it back on my list of things to do as a leader, because I thought, well, if it's not really valued, then maybe I need to again check my ego and realize that it's not as important as I perceived it to be. What about you?
Yeah, and I think it's interesting too that you bring up servant leadership, because I feel a lot of times that particular phrasing is discussed in context of sort of religion, and I think it goes beyond that, and so I do think it applies, and it's just like you said, in all the research I've done, and I could list like probably 5 different papers just off the top of my head right now, but the same things keep being repeated, that if good leaders are people who are building relationships, who can empathize, who know people, and that's, you have to know the people that you are working with or working for, and then basically using that to inspire them to do something, because they may do something because you tell them to, if you're their boss. But realistically, if you inspire them, then they're going to want to do things. And they're going to want to follow your vision because they trust you and they feel that you have their best interest in mind. And so I thought that idea was really, really, really important. So did you want to add anything to that?
Just that by serving others, I think we share the gifts that we're given. I know that Kevin Hall, the author of Inspire, talks about that a little bit. And I truly feel that when we empower and share and serve others in that capacity, that we're paying it forward, so to speak, and allowing other people to develop that capacity within themselves. I guess that's the only thing I wanted to add.
Yeah, and that's so true. So kind of switching gears a little bit, McChrystal also talks about how to manage groups who may not get along. And I thought this was a really great question from Eva, because she's 7 years old and she's already thinking about, there's times when you might be working with people that you don't get along. So how do you navigate this thing? Because it's just as valid when you're in elementary school as when you're an adult. Yeah. So
let me interject. This is a tough knock school she's going to. We've got conflict left and right. People not want. It's just like the real world. This is school that Eva's attending. But go ahead.
You're so true. And it's funny because I think sometimes we minimize the experience of children.
Absolutely.
And really, I think this is a really important lesson for educators, is that if we don't allow kids to be able to navigate these situations and give them the tools and the model and the support to navigate these situations and grow from them, they're not going to be leaders when they're older because they won't have that skill set.
Exactly. You're absolutely right.
Yeah. So McChrystal basically said the quote that you mentioned earlier that inspired you. And it was basically this idea that you basically don't like people who you don't know because you don't trust them. Yeah. And I thought that was really powerful. So he said that you have to get to know people, and that you start small and you build interactions, and then usually that builds some kind of rapport. So have you experienced that at all in any of your experiences, either in school or work or personally?
Oh, absolutely. And I'll even apply it to this class, or this degree program that we're in. I'm always fearful of team projects because I always feel like I end up being the one who does all the work, because you never know what type of, or I guess the work ethic of the person that you're going to end up in a partnership with. Thank God I met you. Mm-hmm. But again, it's that I don't know you, I don't trust you, I don't want to put my academic, my academic status in your hands because I don't know how you'll take care of it. And so I love that through this program, we've had the opportunity to take those small steps to develop trust with one another and to develop an appreciation for each other's skills and appreciation for how we complement one another's weaknesses and strengths, and develop this working partnership that makes us all better people. And I don't know that I don't typically seek out those opportunities because of the trust factor.
I 100% agree. And, obviously we're doing this online because we aren't anywhere near each other. So this is a 100% online distance program. And it's interesting because some of the research that I've been doing in this area talks about how the transactional distance and how it's much harder to build relationships and kind of that community feeling in a distance education program. And it's really, really important. And I feel so lucky that we are doing this in a time when we do have access to things like, the Google suite of products that allows us to completely collaborate online asynchronously, or like Zoom, or different things where we can actually be having a real-time conversation, with being able to see each other and do things like that. And that's been an amazing thing, because I think building those relationships and those communities are really, really important. And I remember when I was in the military, you literally get dumped into a unit where you don't know anyone. There's people from all over the country, sometimes even from, the world, depending on what type of assignment you get. And you have to figure out how to get along with all kinds of different people who have all kinds of different experiences and cultures, age, rank, and
sounds like a Big Brother situation. Here you go.
Except there were no cameras, thank God.
Although you might just have the next big idea for a reality show if you think about it. Yeah, but you also, talking about the asynchronous learning, even in our courses, we've had classmates who felt like, oh, maybe this class isn't what it should be, because it's completely asynchronous. You're not really interacting with anybody, and yet they felt so much more positive and involved and committed when we were, I don't want to say forced, but certainly assigned to work together and interact more with each other.
Oh, 100%. And that kind of brings me up to the next thing that General McChrystal was talking about, where sometimes you have to do things that you don't feel comfortable doing, and you have to push yourself, and you have to grow from that experience and take on challenges that really you feel like you're probably going to fail. But both he and Eva were really kind of hit on the nail, the idea that if you never try anything that doesn't have a guarantee for success, then you're never gonna push yourself to see how far you could really go. And that was, again, another really amazing thing to hear a 7-year-old say. So is there something that you've done?
Dalai Lama, she's so insightful. I mean, or either that or she's amazing show prep. It's just, she's so insightful. It's amazing.
I know. So what have you done that, you feel like you pushed yourself?
I've kind of set myself up in my organization to be that person that other people will come to do that. People come to me when they're uncomfortable with something that's going on and say, can you help me? Will you talk to this person? Will you address this? And I've just been one of those open mouth, insert foot people my whole life, and just see what happens, because I don't know that I'm necessarily comfortable doing it, but I'm not afraid to do it and let the consequences come as they may. And as long as I'm able, if I think I'm doing what's right, not necessarily what everyone wants, but what I truly value as what's right and what's fair, then I'm okay with facing those consequences, because they can usually be resolved if I'm able to explain where I'm coming from and why I have pursued this line of questioning or this method of interacting or wanting to integrate this idea. I always feel as though if I came to it from the right from the right frame of mind, knowing or truly feeling it's the right thing to do, that's a risk that I'm willing to take. Does that make sense?
Oh yeah, absolutely. And and I think sometimes it's hard to be in a position where people are coming to you for advice. And
yeah, I think they're just coming to me to take the risk. I don't know that they're necessarily coming to me for advice, but knowing that I've got their back, I'm going to interact on their behalf if I feel that what they're describing is unjust and doesn't make sense. You know, I'm asking, why is this happening for them when they don't necessarily feel comfortable doing it for themselves.
And that's really awesome, because that's talking about basically taking actions.
Yeah.
And again, listening to people, empathizing with them, understanding what their values are. That's all super important. So
how about you? You didn't share.
Oh, okay. Well,
you're not getting away with it.
You know, it's hard for me to answer this question, because I think, again, and I think I've mentioned this in a previous conversation that we had. You know, boot camp, going through boot camp was a really difficult and challenging experience. And once I completed that, it kind of gave me this mindset that there was nothing that I couldn't deal with, that I couldn't tackle, and that I couldn't handle if I just kind of persevered and stuck with it. I don't know if that's always a good thing, but yeah, I feel like I have an attitude of saying yes. So when people ask me if I'm willing to try or do something, I will say yes. Sometimes I'm not sure if I should be saying yes.
Yeah. Sure, I'll try. Let's try. Let's see.
Yeah, so I feel like I've always been pushing myself. Right now, one of the things that I've been doing a lot in the last couple of years is submitting proposals to present at conferences. And yeah, and honestly, I've been surprised that I've been accepted. And it is scary as nothing else. And I don't think I've shared this with you, but I have a lot of anxiety. And so I know I'm like actually diagnosed anxiety. And so presenting in front of people, and this was even when I was a classroom teacher, I would get really nervous and sometimes get like panic attacks before I was giving a lecture to students or before I present. I get really, really nervous. And it's something that I struggle with all the time. Even sometimes when we're just having a conversation and I'm thinking of a response, and even if I know it's completely safe, I'll feel my heart speed up and I start sweating. And I'm just like, all I want to say is I just want to share this little thing, and it doesn't mean anything. It's nothing, traumatic, but I have to push myself. And a lot of times I feel I don't do as great of a job as I could because of that fear. But people don't realize that, because they're like, oh, you're so personable and you just whatever. And I'm just like, okay, I'm just going to struggle through this. It's going to suck for a little while and it feels horrible. But yeah, I just try and move past it. Cause I don't like keep things stopping me from doing things. So that's
so funny, because I almost wish I had some anxiety about I can very specifically remember when that bubble burst for me. I was running for class president in the 6th grade, and the person who was running against me got up and gave this hilarious speech, completely irrelevant, didn't make any political impact, didn't talk about anything meaningful. And I'm like, okay, in retrospect, I'm 11, and I got up and after him, and I was so serious, and I was like, this is ridiculous. He didn't talk about anything with substance, and I just bombed. And I don't think anybody voted for me, but I learned so much from that. Just, wow. He didn't say anything that meant anything, but everybody loved him. okay, I gave it my best shot. I talked from my heart, about the really impactful situation for us sixth graders at the elementary school. So I was just going to be okay with being myself after that, because I was so I was so devastated that he had the audacity to just be silly, and when this was a very serious situation. And it really, ever since then, I've just been me and not really, I care, but I don't worry about it. Either you like it or you don't. It's what you get. So.
Yeah, I have that same attitude. I feel really strongly about not letting fear and whatever else that's going on in your head kind of keep you from doing things. And it's hard. It's so hard, but man, you just go for it. But I think you showed, demonstrated another thing again, which is, it's amazing how many things we learn from our, elementary and secondary school experiences. And it really shapes who we are. And so it kind of really makes you think about, what are the things that we're teaching our kids that don't have anything to do with the curriculum, but what are we teaching our kids about how to navigate the world through the school system that we currently have. And I know there's some amazing teachers who are doing amazing things. So
absolutely. Can I go off script a little bit and ask you if you had a defining elementary school moment?
Ooh.
Vividly sticks in your mind? I know. I didn't give you any warning about this.
I know. Man, now you put me on the spot. I don't think so. Probably it was probably a culmination. Oh, I remember one.
That was awesome to see that come into your face.
This one is failure. I remember when I was in high school, I used to hang out with a lot of talented people who were in theater, and I dabbled in theater as well. And I was okay. I think, I don't know. But one time I wanted to try out for a musical. And so I think I tried out for Grease. I don't even remember what song I did anymore, but it's an understatement to say that I can't sing. I sing horribly. And so I went to this audition and I sang my little heart out. And as soon as I opened my mouth, I knew it was a bad idea. And I was just like, well, I'm just going to go with it. And I finished it. And I was so embarrassed. And yeah, I've never done that again.
So you haven't tried out for America's Got Talent. Okay, you're amazing though. If you have this anxiety, you have developed amazing skills for coping with it and moving on and embracing the fear and doing your best in spite of it. So kudos to you. I would never have guessed that about you. Never, ever.
Honestly, it was like years and years and years of therapy. So
well, hey, you found a way to cope. That's what's important.
You have to find coping skills, and it's like, I mean, everyone has their personal issues or challenges that they face in whatever they do, and it's you have to recognize what your personal challenges or limitations are, and then figure out how to cope with them. Absolutely. And I think some of the most amazing people are people who have found ingenuous ways of kind of finding a workaround for something that was a barrier to them specifically.
They showed their ink. The book we were talking about.
We're going to be talking about that later, so don't jump the gun.
Okay.
Okay, so kind of switching a little bit. One of the things that General McChrystal talked about in response to Eva's questions about routines and practices that are helpful for success. He said that you have to have a discipline to your values. And so he mentioned things like sleep and eating well and cleaning up after yourself, and even how you treat people and building these kinds of habits. So what did you think about when he said that?
I 100% agree. But I feel like this EDD program has just shot all that square in the buttocks. I don't take care of myself as much as I should because I just don't have the time. I feel like more pressure because of all of our academic requirements. And I sincerely look forward to getting back to a more stable, manageable lifestyle. And while I thoroughly enjoyed these challenges, which is pretty much how I look at our coursework, I do realize the destabilizing effect it has on my life. So, but I do, when I'm not in an EDD program, try to maintain that balance, because I think it's important for my kids, for the people I work with, that I am as dependable and as available to them emotionally as I can be, which you don't always get when you aren't disciplined and balanced in your life.
I 100% agree. And I also just want to mention that for people who don't know us, is we're also working full-time jobs
Full-time.
while we're doing this. So it's not just the program. We basically have 2 full-time jobs with
and
both of these
committees, and just like everyone in life, we've chosen what we're doing, but it is certainly not just the single focus that it could be, or that it might have been had we done this when we were in our 20s.
Yeah, no, and I 100% agree, because there was I was reading an article about Psychology Today, and they were talking about sleep and about reducing stress and all of these things that you should do to improve cognitive function, and I'm like, this is right up there with it, and I'm like, and I'm over here, it's 1:00 in the morning, and I'm reading something or catching up on something. But
or just let the spell check do all the work.
You know what? The one good thing about this is that I think I think we both have this, Renee. We both kind of have a little bit of a perfectionist quality, and
I completely do. Completely do.
And I think we're kind of both learning to let go a little. And
absolutely. And that is, and that is one of the things I strive for all the time, is to just let it be. Enough is great. Good enough. It doesn't have to be perfect. The journey of getting there is as important as the end result itself. And I wouldn't have had that perspective at 20. I would have just been driven, and still have to catch myself from being that much of it. Oh yeah, totally. Dr. Cooper even called me out on it last semester when I showed him my notes. How I was reading through the book. He was like, "Oh, you got a little bit of OCD there, huh?" And I was like, "What? Yes, but so no." But he was very charming.
And I remember that, and so Renee was talking about what's our research methods textbook, and she shows us her book, and I think almost the entire page was highlighted, and
but
it was
different colors. It all made sense to me at the time. It was all so relevant. So yeah, absolutely. But reflecting on General McCreary, he could have easily gone down the quagmire of perfectionism, but he talks about the discipline of recognizing when enough is enough, and when you're doing as much as you can, and allowing other people to to step in and be a part of those successes and being a part of the team. I found I actually went out, of course, like I do every time because I'm OCD a little bit, and wanted to know more about him and wanted to know more about how he came to be this kind of leader. And started listening to some more stuff that he had participated in. And again, what an inspiring person and a real person. I didn't ever feel that he was telling Eva what he thought she needed to hear. He was actually, walking the walk, talking the talk. This was who he truly was as a person. And again, it made me reflect that I think maybe only with his 34 years of experience and living in his own skin and being comfortable with himself as a person, can he be that empathetic and that real with everyone in his life. I think experience helps us to become a much more real leader, and he illustrated that.
Yeah, absolutely. And he is very authentic. And I think that's also a leadership trait that we've seen over and over again, is authenticity is key. He also said something about, and I wrote it down because I'm not organized like you are. Yeah. I don't have everything color coded, so I like scribble on sides and pieces of paper that I can't find.
You use real paper?
I use real paper and the computer. I use everything. I know. But one of the things that he said was that very few decisions that you can make are ones that you can't recover from. Yeah. And sometimes you need to stop wasting so much time thinking about all of the things that could go wrong or what ifs and all of that, and then just get away from that analysis paralysis and make a decision.
That was so powerful.
Yes. And even if it's not necessarily the best decision, there's very few decisions, like he said, that you can't recover from and that you can't change your mind.
Yeah.
So did you think of anything when he said that?
Everything, because so often in my work experience, oh my God, and even more as a parent, I have totally blown it, screwed up, misjudged a situation with my kids, and have always gone back, and when I learned the real circumstances, apologized and started over. And we talked about how I didn't get it. Yeah, there's a pretty recent experience that's making me chuckle, where I thought my son's was inviting a friend over to do something a little sketchy, and so because this parent texted me about it, and the way it came across was my son was inviting her son to go do something, and so I sat my son down and I was like, "What are you doing? This is insane!" And he was like, okay, but it was just the reverse. Her son was inviting my son to go do something that they had planned, but because there was that just slip in communication, so of course, then when I found out the reality of it, I was mortified and talked to my son and apologized, and it ended up being funny that I thought my son was being the bad influence, and I thought her son was being the bad influence, and neither one of them were being a bad influence. It was just a miscommunication. And now I'm completely off track. So reel me in, Rita. I've gone into the marshes.
No. I think you hit on another aspect of leadership, even if you're not in a position of power. That's really important, which is taking accountability for your actions. And admitting when you make a mistake. Because I know from many experiences that there have been times where I have screwed up, and I, there's always that fear that, you're going to have a major consequence, like you're going to get in trouble or you're going to get fired or whatever. And not that anything has ever been that dramatic, but you always jump to the worst possible consequence, even if it's disproportionate to whatever it was. And every single time, as I've always tried to be the person who goes to my boss and says, hey, I think I screwed up. I'm really sorry. This is what I did, and this is what happened as a result, and I need help fixing it. And every time that I have done that, it's always been like, oh yeah, you screwed up, and I really appreciate that you came to me directly and didn't wait for me to find out, or when it spiraled out of control. And so it was kind of a nothing. It was just kind of like, okay, well, what are we going to do now? Let's figure out how we're going to deal with this. And you learned your lesson, right? Yeah, you did. So
you punished yourself so much worse than what could have ended up happening to anyway, right?
I know. And I think I used to see that from my students as well. They would come up to me and they would be so scared about something relatively minor, and like they didn't have their homework, or they forgot something, and you'd be like, okay, well, let's talk about this. Like, okay, what's the worst thing that can happen? And okay, well, you did X, and yeah, there is consequence Y. Is it that bad? No, I still like you. I still think you're an awesome person. Like, or do you need some help figuring out ways to avoid this in the future? And we brainstorm, and then we move on.
Yeah.
And that's all you can do.
Wait. You had an authentic connection with your kids, and you made them realize that you cared about them as a person. You built that relationship. You communicated all these leadership skills that we're talking about. You're doing it,
Renee,
right?
Teachers don't do those things.
Oh,
we just to the test.
They so do. That's great teachers do those things.
Yes. No, you're
stay in education anyway, right?
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. I mean, those relationships are the key. I don't think you can be a good teacher without having relationships with your kids.
Because, and I'm going to throw a bad word in here, anybody has a bullshit meter, it is kids in school. They know you don't care, and you are just going through the motions, and they will call you on it too. Your colleagues might not directly to your face anyway, but your students sure will. And that's one of the most invigorating and wonderful things about working, at least in high school for me, because they keep it real. They keep me in check. They keep me in. It's a wonderful give and take relationship with the high school students.
Yeah, and sometimes you don't even realize that something that you might be doing has such an impact, and you may not even be aware that you're doing something. It could be just an affect of your personality, and kids will come up to you and they will tell you, and then you really have to sit back and kind of analyze what you're saying or how you might be doing something, and then how it is perceived by others, which again comes to feedback, being willing to take that feedback and then reflect on it, and then hopefully making changes that are pushing you in a positive direction.
Absolutely.
And so it's like we can learn so much from kids, always.
And Eva, it's a great kid that we learned from this week.
I know. Okay, so now I'm going to copy Eva, and we're gonna do. I hope you're ready. Because we're gonna do the rapid fire questions.
I'm not ready. I'm unprepared, but let's do it anyway.
Well, that's okay. You're supposed to be unprepared. Exactly. You have to answer. So we're gonna go. Okay, ready?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay. What is your greatest achievement?
Being a mom so far. I love it. Kids are the coolest.
What do you do for fun?
Nothing anymore. I have no fun. I do know. What do I do for fun? I love outdoor stuff. I go camping and canoeing and as much as I can. But for me, that's the winter because down here, it's just too hot to do much of anything in the summertime. So when we have our winter break, I am outdoors camping and doing things with my sons outside.
Okay. If you go back in time and talk to your 10-year-old self, what would be the best advice?
Oh God. I've shared a little bit of my history with you. My mom was married this many times, and it was always such just an unstable childhood to just tell myself to it gets better, you don't always live in this vacuum of instability and change. Things will start to be manageable.
Mm-hmm. Okay, and what is your big dream for the future?
Oh gosh. I kind of
ask little questions.
Yeah, I know, right? Deep. This is my dream for the future. I keep learning new stuff and interacting with people that inspire me, and hopefully paying that forward and sharing that with other people, and allowing other people to I guess to access the tools to live their dreams, because that's really for me what it's all about, is in helping others.
Awesome.
Now I feel like I should ask you something. I'm unprepared. What is your shoe size? No, I'm kidding.
What is my what?
Shoe size. No, I'm teasing.
7.5.
Oh, you have little bitty feet. So what are you going to do this summer? Are you doing anything fun? Rapid fires.
I'm doing homework.
Exactly. Is that what you do for fun? What do you do for fun when you don't have homework?
I love watching movies. I used to enjoy, well, I still do enjoy reading books, although now I don't have as much time to do that. So I listen to a lot of audiobooks right now.
Me too.
And I'm not going to lie, the audiobooks that I listen to are all fiction, and they're all vampires, because I have a
You recommended that book to me when we first met, and it was so funny and so sad about the fat ugly vampire, or what was that one?
Oh, I don't even remember. I've read so many books about vampires, and they run the gamut from like YA to like really like serious to super silly to like almost, I guess, romance. I don't know. There's this weird like paranormal romance thing that's like vampire.
Teen librarian, totally get that. So what are we listening to next week?
Okay, so next week we're gonna actually be listening to a podcast by Barbara Bray.
She tweeted at you, right?
Did, and it's gonna be featuring another person that you're probably familiar. Do you know who it is?
David Bowie.
No,
his name's Don, and he's awesome, and I want to do what he does so badly.
Mm-hmm. Yes. So that's actually one of our social media connections that we foster that. So that's going to be fun. Yeah. And then I think you also noticed that the Dream Big podcast also interviews another author that we've been kind of talking about on Twitter. You want to share that?
That was just amazing. Again, I go back to 7-year-old Eva, and she's pulling in all these powerhouses around the world. Yeah, I'm not sure that it's still her latest podcast, but she interviews Simon Sinek, and that's he actually has 2 books on the leadership possibilities for us to read for Dr. LaPrairie's class. So Dr. LaPrairie, you're going to have to go out and listen to Dream Big and her interview with Simon.
Yes. So I'm super excited about next week.
Me too. So I think that wraps up this week. And
it really does.
This again. Yeah. We are really good at stretching a 10-minute podcast into an hour-and-a-half conversation. So, but I love them all. I feel like I learned so much through our conversation. So thank you for participating in these with me. because we only have to do that last one for the class. But I really hope this continues for us because I learned.
Oh, it's going to continue whether you like it or not.
Okay. All right. So I'll talk to you next week after we listen to Barbara Bray's podcast.
Okay,
Bye.
awesome. Bye.